ครับ Welcome to thailandtoday.co on Facebook Live. Today we're going to talk to an expert on crisis management. Especially we are still in the middle of the COVID-19 virus crisis. So please welcome Kun Larry Chao. He is the managing director of Chao Company Ltd. And a management consultant company. So welcome Larry to the program.
How are you, Kunopakon? Thank you very much.
Fine, how are you?
I'm very good.
Yeah, so thailandtoday.co is an English language news website, and now we have the Facebook Live with you. So
Okay.
I have to give you an update on the COVID-19, or the formerly known as coronavirus. Everyone around the world aware of this situation. So the latest update is that in China now, more than 2,200 people are killed by this virus, and in China they reported more than 35,000 confirmed cases. So continue to rise even though it may have peaked out. In Thailand, the number is still at 35 confirmed cases, and only 18 patients remain in the hospital. So the rest of them already returned home, recover. So the problem also very critical for businesses and industries. For example, I just saw the news that even the real estate sector in Thailand now is hit by this COVID-19 situation, because Larry and everyone, many Chinese come here and buy condos, you see. So they have put down payment, they have to pay installment, but now the situation in China is a big trouble. So a lot of condominium projects here in Bangkok and other big cities have been affected by the situation. And then we heard about hotels, airlines hit hard by the sudden slowdown of tourist arrivals. You heard about the supply chain, factories in China, quite a lot still not open following the Chinese New Year. So that affecting supply chain, including for factories in Thailand, which is part of the global supply chain. So it's a big and critical situation for our business manager, CEO. Larry, can you give an advice on crisis management at this time?
Sure, Kunopakon. It's a broad topic. It's a very timely one, though, because it's not just crisis related to this COVID-19. As you know, businesses have been in crisis for several years now, just in terms of the amount of volatility and change and uncertainty. So the ability to adjust to these uncertain times and this particular situation is really important. It really is top of mind of any CEO. And I can tell you, in Thailand, specifically for this COVID situation, this crisis, most CEOs are thinking of two things. Number one, business continuity, but more important and pressing, of course, is the safety of their employees and the well-being of their employees. That's a top priority. So making sure that you have the policies in place to protect your employees and their families. For example, stopping travel to any of the affected countries, postponing any unnecessary travel, those things. So that's one thing related to employees. The other thing I think is really important that I see around me, Kunopakun, is the need for clear, informed, regular communication. I mean, as you know, this thing is changing every day. It's being updated, and it's really important to dispel any kind of rumors. And as you know, with social media, it's very easy to spread news, both truthful and untruthful. So I think it's incumbent upon the CEOs to think about business continuity, but also more importantly, at this very minute, to make sure their employees and families are safe, and that they keep them up to date in terms of what's happening and the impact on their business and what they're doing to protect them.
So Larry, how best can CEO and top managers maintain the business as much as usual as possible at this time of the situation?
Sure. I mean, I think it depends on the business. I mean, if you're a company in Thailand and you're exporting, for example, to some of the markets that were affected, let's say, for example, you're exporting food products to China. I think, you will see immediately that your demand is going down, slipping down, and, with good reason, people aren't going out and buying products. But they are staying at home, and they still need products. So in the case of foods, people are buying products, but they may not be buying them through the traditional channels that they go to eat. So, for example, food and beverages is probably going down in terms of volume. The key account, the big retailers, people aren't going out and shopping. But you can see there's an uptick in terms of the activity with e-commerce. So, if you're a CEO, you're trying to think, what do I need to do to try to make sure my volumes and the demand stays as high as possible? So do I need to switch channels? What do I need to do? So you're strategizing to try to figure out how to, at least temporarily move some of the volume to the channels that are least affected. That, in fact, it is an opportunity in the case of, let's say, China with food products.
So you're saying online and e-commerce are big opportunities at this time, especially in China, where shopping malls and outdoor places are relatively quiet, right?
I believe so. I mean, people still have to eat, and I think but at the same time they're restricted to going out. So the only option they have is the e-commerce and the transportation that gets the food to their homes.
What about those in the tourism and related industry? Is there any options for them to minimize the impact, or nothing much can be done at this time?
I think this is a great opportunity. I mean, I think if you look on the surface, you think about the number of tourists that are coming from these affected countries that has gone down, the decrease in the numbers. And, the initial reaction is, oh my gosh, we've got to do something to manage our costs. But I think that's one approach. I think the more effective approach is to think about what you can do during these times. And obviously, again, the first thing you want to protect your employees, particularly if you're in the leisure industry, the travelers and guests, where your staff comes in contact with a lot of people. You want to make sure that you have good hygiene. Some of the people who may interact with guests are wearing masks. You keep things clean, etc. But for example, I remember back in there was an incident with the SARS back in 2003 or so, where Tony Fernandez in Asia Air, I mean, he had an interesting story where people were affected by SARS and nobody was traveling in Malaysia. And Fernandez, he said, look, he tripled his advertising at that time. He lowered his prices, and he had a boom because he felt that it was a great time to do brand building when nobody else was doing anything. So, I'm not saying everybody should do that, but for example, I think the worst thing to do is to panic and say, well, geez, we have fewer travelers, therefore, we have to somehow furlough people or stop activity. I think when people, the employees in the leisure industries, when they don't have anything to do or just are idle, that's the worst. I think if I was in the leisure industry, if I was in hotels or airlines, this is the time when I would do the things that are important but not urgent. So there's a flurry of these things, building capabilities, renovating certain areas, thinking and brainstorming about new ideas, new menus, how are you going to attract people? What can you do today in the industry, whether you're a hotel or you're the service industry, to attract people to your business that people might not do because they're scared to take a chance, to take a risk? And that's why I mentioned at the beginning that, we talk about this as a crisis, and it is a crisis. The COVID-19 is a crisis, but just because this happens, and it will happen and it'll go, hopefully, it doesn't mean crisis stops. I mean, people are constantly under crisis. The whole internet and digital is a crisis for companies that aren't prepared. So you've got to be able to think about what's going on externally and adapt given the conditions.
What about manufacturing industry? You have any thoughts on how they should best cope with the situation?
Well, I think it depends on the manufacturing, and it depends on how you manufacture. So, for example, if you're assembling here in Thailand and you're getting a lot of the parts from China, that's going to really affect your planning for sure, how you get parts. Now, unfortunately, I think many people use China as a source of low-cost parts, and they didn't have a plan B. So I think, it's really tough to suddenly figure out how to get your parts and sources from another place than China. And actually, that's a learning more long-term about how you do it. So, again, if you're manufacturing here in Thailand, getting your parts in China, you really have to figure out how to plan your manufacturing. I mean, the worst thing, I think, is that you stop manufacturing, and then you've got to restart. Because restarting is really tough to do. And manufacturing on the fly, when demand goes up, you might be behind if you've stopped.
So, Larry, you talk about the need for Plan B for manufacturing industry, maybe.
Sure. When I think of manufacturing, not for everybody, but from a lot of the supply chain companies that do business in China, whether they're assembling in China and then exporting, or whether they're sourcing parts from China, they've really looked at it as a pure operation, try to generate the lowest possible cost. It's no longer that way. I don't think you can effectively do that, because it's now become a situation where if you don't have a Plan B in a situation like the we're in right now happens, you're going to lose a lot of money. There's a lot of companies that do business with China now who are losing money, and I think stockholders obviously aren't happy about that. The dilemma is that you want to make sure you invest smartly. So you can't have Plan B, Plan C, Plan D, like 5 or 6 other plans, because you're wasting money. But I think the lesson from this is that you definitely need an alternative, particularly with China. I mean, it was almost people with fervor, going to China saying we have to have an operation in China at the exclusion of other alternatives. But I think this is a lesson for top managers that supply chain planning is not just pure operations and minimal cost and convenience. It's really a strategic issue.
But probably the export sector right here in Thailand will more or less hit relatively hard by this COVID-19, especially for the first half of this year. Is that your opinion?
I mean, that and the currency, it's making life really tough. Again, for me, not only how you manage where you source and export your products in the markets, one of the most important things is it'll help the companies in Thailand globalize further, I hope, so that you don't just look at one market that you're familiar with and you say, what do I really want to do? And actually, a lot of companies are thinking about this. They're thinking about this more long term. They're saying, we do business in one country, let's say China, and then in 5 years we're going to try to expand to other places in Asia, and then maybe to Europe. Why not bring those plans up? What's preventing people from bringing those plans forward? What's preventing people from doing the things they should be doing today, now, instead of waiting 3 to 5 years? I mean, that's, to me, the bigger opportunity, and that's, to me, the bigger trend, which is companies need to be, have this crisis mentality and think about how do you adapt and stay competitive when things like this are happening all the time, not just once in a while, but all the time.
So, I said earlier that many condominium projects in Bangkok, another big city, tourist city, been hit hard by the situation in China, because they have thousands, maybe tens of thousands of customers who are Chinese, and then they being hit by the COVID-19, and they affecting their purchases of condominium here in Thailand. So you have any advice for them, the developer, the real estate company?
It depends where you're living. I know that in the center of the town, real estate prices are very high. So, it is the market forces at work here. If I'm a developer, I better be selling really good value, and I better be targeting and improving the way I market externally. But at some point, in my opinion, in certain areas of Bangkok, the prices are really high. And so, you're going to see a natural fall because of the reduced demand from China, which is a big market. It was a bit unreal. There's a lot of business coming from China. I think maybe he's trying to seek a more balanced segment of customers coming into Thailand in terms of international residents. I think it's good. Again, exploring the new business in Europe is a place where you can get other sources of tenants is a possibility. But I think this one is one where prices, I believe, are high anyways. So perhaps this slide in demand from people, from Chinese looking to invest in condominiums, maybe it's a slight blessing in disguise to prevent the bubble from getting too big.
You mentioned about employee safety at this time, very important. And we have seen, especially in China, more and more people working from home, as a precautionary. You think this trend, not only in China, but in other countries, will continue?
I think it's going to happen where it has to happen. So, I mean, if you were to talk to people in Hong Kong, most of them have the option. In fact, most of them are taking the option and working from home. And I think that's one of the successes of Hong Kong from the SARS experience, where they really figured out how to combat the issue. So, you have many of the people staying at home during work and leisure. I mean, most of the shopping malls are empty, the restaurants empty. So people are working at home. Now, as far as Thailand is concerned, with the people who I know, most people are not working from home. Most people are still going to work and feel safe. And I think most companies are responsible. And so if, somebody's sick, they send them home. But I think, again, it's not necessary. It's the disease itself is bad enough. What's even worse is the panicking around it and creating unnecessary turmoil about what the disease is not. So, for me, if you start sending people home without a good reason to, you start panicking. So I think, it's very important to understand really what's going on. What are the facts about the disease? Where is it spreading? And then make a decision based on that so that people are safe, but they're not panicking. And again, it's about business continuity. How do you keep your employees safe? How do you keep them ready? So when this is all over, you hit the ground running and you're ahead of the game.
So, based on your observation, Larry, what do you think the timeline is most likely for the COVID-19 situation to get better, or it has to be?
All right, so you're asking me to look into my crystal ball, which is as good as any, but let me give it a shot, Kunopakun. I mean, in the USA, not being a doctor or anything, I know that typically the flu and these things usually decreases when it gets warmer. So I'm hoping that by April or so it decreases. What I really love about Thailand so far, from what I've seen, is people are cautious. So they're not going and being reckless. Yet at the same time, they don't seem to be panicking. People are wearing masks, but not everybody. Maybe in the BTS you are in close proximity. But I think what I like is that people are taking the precautions. I would just say that, again, if I'm a CEO, I want to make sure that my people really are doing the right things and not going overboard, so that we can maintain a healthy balance between what we're doing now versus what getting ready for when this all ends. I will say one thing I think is important, and that's that there's a lot. This has really exposed a lot of opportunity. One of the biggest opportunities is the relationship between the international pharmaceutical companies and the Thai government, the Ministry of Health. I mean, there's so much opportunity that can happen with the organizations and the associations that deal with the government, and creating win-win, where drugs and solutions are affordable, and where the government and the pharmaceutical companies can come together and find solutions for the people. Because after all, this is what it's all about. So for example, there's an association called PRIMA, Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturing Association, and what a body of knowledge and information. And if only people can cooperate together, maybe things like this can be avoided in the future. Maybe we can create an environment in Thailand where, it's safe and people feel they're receiving the best possible care.
And last but not least, Larry, what is your final words on crisis management on the COVID-19 for top managers?
Yeah, I mean, again, two things. Number one, employees and their families, safety and well-being is number one. You've got to have that front and center of what you do. I would not take any unnecessary risks. I would be watching this closely. And the second thing, of course, is planning how you're going to restart your business. How can you manage your business today and take advantage of what's happening to maybe leapfrog others, maybe to do things, for example, like that Tony Fernandez does. Don't go into a shell and say, look, the only option I have is to just wait it out. and reduce people when the revenues don't come in. I think that's purely defensive, and I think in this day and age of all this uncertainty and change, being agile and managing crisis like this is going to be the norm.
So, Larry, thank you for your time for sharing your opinions and give the advice on crisis management for the top manager, for the CEO and our audiences. So,
all right.
Yeah, you can follow thailandtoday.co on Facebook Live, online, on Twitter, and on our website thailandtoday.co. Today we run out of time and we have to say goodbye. Thanks again, Larry, and thanks our audience. Bye bye.